I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. My friend, I am here with Rachel, and we go back many years. And she's going to share her pivotal moment that changed her life forever, or changed her family's life forever, and all the people around her. But first, let's just talk a little bit about how we know each other. It's been a while.
It has been. I was actually thinking about it earlier. I couldn't remember if it was, I know it was high school, but if it was prior to that as well. I couldn't remember. But either way, it's been a very long time. And then I also happened to be neighbors with your grandma growing up, who was the best lady ever.
And honestly, sure, high school, we had a lot of people at our high school, to be fair. I think we had about 3,000 people at any given point in our high school. And so our paths did not cross too much, like through classes. You were in a different grade and those kind of things. But I do remember distinctly the connection of being neighbors with my grandmother. And after the fact, you sharing stories, or my grandmother sharing stories about running into you or talking to you. So that's really what I remember you through.
That's funny. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. There was no direct connection, but always, I always say when it's meant to be that somebody is in your life for a short amount of time, a long amount of time, there's a reason for it. So.
Right. And I've been talking. Yeah, right. And I've been talking to so many people so far, and a lot of our conversations are almost thankful for social media in a way that we are able to, even though we're not near each other, we're able to keep in touch through either just like a passive engagement or, messages or those kind of things. So I am grateful that we have that opportunity, because I feel like I get to see what's happening in your life and the life of your kids, and just kind of keep up and feel that connection still. I don't know if you feel that way with a lot of your friends.
Yeah. And I feel like you probably would have lost touch with so many people had it not been for social media. So that's exactly the case.
Right. And it feels like too that everyone lost touch because we didn't have social media at the time, and it came along later. And I think that with all the bad things that people see on social media and the things that can be harmful to people, there are positives if you use it right, I guess.
Exactly that. If you use it correctly, and I think as it's intended to be used, there's a lot of positive that can come out of it.
I agree. Well, I asked you to be a part of this show, and you volunteered as well. And I was actually on your podcast. When was that? A couple years ago.
Yeah.
Sharing a little bit of my story. And so tell us a little bit about you. And I know your pivotal moment was 3 years ago yesterday, but I want to know, or set the stage a little bit, of who you are and what you were doing up to that point. What was life like for you?
So I went to the University of Florida after high school. I graduated in 2005 and immediately moved to New York City. I knew that I was not going to stay there forever. I think when you're from a place like South Florida, it is hard to not come back. Nothing really beats it. There's a few places that could beat it. So it was always in my intention to come back here to South Florida. And I did so about 3 to 4 years after moving to New York. And upon doing so, my best friend, she's still my best friend. At the time, she was in law school. And I actually had taken a trip back down to South Florida while I was still living in New York. And my best friend and all of her law school buddies were going to see their friend from law school who was in a band in downtown Fort Lauderdale. So I went with them. The guy that was singing happened to be their friend. That was really the end of that story. But I talk about it because of course, as life would have it, he became a huge part of my life. So when I moved back to South Florida from New York in 2008, I went, I ended up eventually moving to downtown Fort Lauderdale. I went to my best friend's apartment one night, and that guy was there. His name was Matt. They called him Fio, Fio, because his last name is Fiorello. I, this entire time, thought they were saying Theo, Theo, so had no idea what his name was. But there was a moment in her apartment where I was sitting on the couch, and there were quite a few people out on their balcony, and he was one of them. And when he came back in, he looked at me on the couch, and immediately I knew he was looking at me like way deeper than just looking, scanning the room to see who was there. There was this instant feeling that I got from him, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? I can't say that the feeling was returned on my part, but I felt it on his part, which just totally caught me off guard. The way he was looking at me, the way, like, the intensity that I felt through his eyes. And I knew basically that, like, he was coming for me at some point that night. So, but I actually think either I left shortly after, or he left shortly after. And as any non-law school attendee would do, I attended a law school event to meet up with my best friend and all of her law school buddies, probably maybe a couple months or so later. And Matt Fio was there. He came right up to me that night and was coming on strong. Like, he wanted my number. He wanted to know, what I was up to, that whole thing. So we chatted for a while. I gave him my number. And that night he texted me just kind of very casually to see if I got home. I was being kind and I was responding to his texts. He always told the story that, like, I kept texting him. No, I did not. I was just responding to the text. So basically, we kept the conversation going from there through text. And as luck would have it, he magically shows up at my apartment complex the next day because he just happened to be visiting my pool. His best friend's brother lived in the same building. And so I got a text saying, hey, I'm at your pool. So I didn't go up there, and I didn't really meet up with him, but we saw each other. Where my apartment was located was close to the hot tub. So he was going to go down to the hot tub. I waved, talked to him for a minute from my balcony, and that was kind of it. So again, he kind of kept texting from there.
Do you feel like you were playing along, or did you not feel that strong connection just yet?
I didn't really feel a strong connection just yet. And it's not that I was playing along. I am never one to quickly dismiss the idea of something. So I always, until I know for certain, one way or another, there's no harm in it, right? He was a super nice guy. Like,
Right.
We were having a fun conversation. Like, it was fine to continue that banter back and forth.
And it seemed like life was putting him in place wherever you were on purpose.
Well, whether life was putting him there or he was making the decisions to magically appear there, whatever the case was, yes. So the interesting thing is that I'd heard a lot about this person from my best friend, right? Because they're this core group of friends from law school. And as my best friend, she's always talking about, the people that she's hanging out with. So I knew that he had been in a relationship that was quite interesting. And I couldn't understand why somebody would allow somebody else to treat them that way. And so it kind of gave me this immediate, not a negative, because it was actually all positive things. Like, he was great.
Right.
The fact that he was tolerating somebody else, to treat them this way or their behaviors, to me, I was like, oh gosh, like, what kind of guy, lets someone treat them like that? Well, after knowing Matt, it all makes so much sense. Like, he was probably one of the best people he is the best person I've ever met in my life. So it makes so much sense now, being able to look back. But I think I just knew the background to his situation and prejudged him, which, as we can all learn from that, and just we've been told so many times, don't don't prejudge someone, make your own judgment. So it wasn't until I finally agreed to go to dinner with him, and we were sitting at dinner one night, and I was able to have that conversation for myself. And we talked about past relationships, and we, opened up that door. And I was like, I got to hear his side of it basically. And it made so much sense. And it was because he was a solid person, and kind of the same thing as what I just told you, really making sure before he closed that door that he was just being kind and respectful no matter what somebody else was doing, on the other side of it.
Right. How long was that from when you had first met him or saw him perform? Was that first date?
I briefly mentioned the part where he was on stage, his band was playing, because
Right.
it's just, to me, little things like that get put into your life. It all adds up when you look back. There was really no significance to it, though. I don't know that he even realized, that I was that same person on the couch as, at the band. Who knows? I mean, I think we talked about it, but I think he remembers meeting me, but it wasn't that initial, like, when he saw me in her apartment, there was no denying, like, okay, he's coming for me. So probably from the time he saw me in my best friend's apartment, it was probably maybe a month or two later that we finally went to dinner. But we had been, after that second meeting, also, I'll add in, I was dating someone at the time, so who also happened to be going to that lawyer event that I went to. So, and I was actually going with him too. So there's a lot to the story there. But no, at that point, I knew that that person and I were not, going to be a thing.
Right.
And I was just kind of, like I said, entertaining the idea of communicating with Matt.
So the way you talk about Matt, I'm assuming things progressed from there.
Yeah. So after I went to dinner with him and had that conversation and allowed him to speak for himself, it kind of put things into perspective for me. And so immediately I could feel a shift, right? I could feel a partial shift that, like, wow, this person is special. I don't know that I was still, like, fully sold on the idea of being with him, but it opened my eyes a little bit more, and I could start to see the option of, like, oh, before I was just kind of communicating with him. Now I was like, oh, could I date this person?
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of where it really took an initial shift.
Yeah, your mentality or your approach to allowing him more information about you seems to have opened up after that initial conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And from there, I mean, things progressed pretty quickly. So the night that I saw him at the lawyer event, it was in October. And I know that because it was my birthday's at the end of October, and the next night I was going out to celebrate my birthday. So it had to have been the end of October. And that November, we became official, like at the end of November. So we're talking about a month before we were like all in,
Right.
This is like a thing. Basically, so we start dating. And again, things kind of, we started a relationship, and that was at the end of November. I ended up going with his family that year to Thanksgiving and got to meet his whole family. That, just, it allows you to see another side of someone as well. Like, his family is absolutely wonderful. So from there, we just kind of, our relationship progressed. I can recall the moment that I knew I was going to marry him. I don't know how long after it was. It could have been a couple months, but there's this one moment where we were going out to dinner. We were in the car. My mom happened to be in the car with us. She was in the back seat, and he didn't say anything profound or anything like that. I think it was the way he was engaging in conversation with my mom. And there was just a moment, we were sitting at the light of Broward Boulevard, and not uphill. And I had this light bulb go off and I was like, I'm going to marry that person. Like there was just something in the way he was, I don't know if it was like the way he was talking to my mom or just there was something that like hit me and I was like, this is it. Like, this is it.
If everyone could be so lucky to have that moment of clarity that it was going to happen. So how long after that did you actually get married to this wonderful gentleman?
So it was quite a while. We dated for about 4 years before we finally got married. I think we were engaged. So we started dating in 2000, the end of 2008. We were engaged in 2011 and we were married in 2012.
And then you added to your family
In 2013. So we jumped right on that bandwagon. I think after, we've been together for 4 years by the time we got married and we knew we were going to start a family. To me, there was no point in waiting. If Matt could have waited, he would have kept on waiting. And I was trying to explain to him, first of all, there's a 9-month gestation period in case you're unaware, but also, I don't know that there's ever a perfect time. We tried pretty quickly after the wedding, a couple months later, and got pregnant with our oldest daughter, who was born at the end of December 2013. And she is now 8 years old. And then about under 2.5 years later, we had our second daughter, who is going to be 6 at the end of April. That kind of wrapped up our little family for us.
Yeah. Do you think you said that Matt may have just waited forever? Do you think because he was someone that wanted to wait till the perfect moment and you were the person that were like, there is no perfect moment. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. So I think for him, he wanted to be sure he was fully set and stable to provide this perfect life for his child. And I don't know that anyone ever feels that they're in that perfect situation, especially financially, I think. And, it was very responsible of him to have those thoughts, but I don't think you're ever ready. I mean, when you buy your first home, you have those thoughts. I don't know if I can handle this. Any change is going to produce this uncertainty. It did so when we purchased our first house. At that point, we were already pregnant, but it all goes, I think it's all a huge change in your life. It's unexpected. It's not unexpected, but you don't know what's going to come from it. You don't know, it's just kind of the unknown,
right?
But it all worked out perfectly. I mean, it literally, everything just seemed to always line up. And this is like, it makes so much sense. And the timing was perfect. And I'm so glad that we, did it the way we did.
Right. Yeah. And this whole time you've been talking about Matt in glowing ways. And why don't you tell us a little bit about his relationship with your daughters?
I always say that I am one of the luckiest people to not only to have married Matt and have had him in my life, but to watch him become a dad. And in that moment, literally when London was born, our oldest daughter, I was focused on him and watching him hold her and have this instant shift in his life, watching him become, it was, I don't know if everyone feels that way or experiences that, but it was so profound for me because it was like written all over his face. And he was so hands-on. So Matt was a lawyer. And one of the most beautiful things about Matt is that he never let anything affect him. Everything just kind of brushed right off his shoulders, roll right off his shoulders. And if he had a rough day, you would never have known. He would have come home. He might talk about it and share his day with you, but it was not going to affect his attitude, his behavior, the way he acted. So he was always present. He was always home, to make sure that we could have dinner together. He always gave our daughters a bath at night, starting from when they were newborns. Like I was so nervous to put our little tiny babies in water that he handled all that. And from there, like bath time kind of became his thing. So that was their time together, just when we had London, and then when we had both girls, London and Arden. And that was their time. They would have fun in the bath, play. He would sing them songs. Matt always had music playing, and, he would just blare music and sing, and they'd be having a blast upstairs while I was, doing whatever I was doing, having a couple moments to myself, I guess. But I mean, literally, when they were newborns, he would wake up with me in the middle of the night. Like, as someone who had a very demanding job, needed to be on, he was up with me every time our daughters woke up in the middle of the night as infants while I fed them. Whether he sometimes would literally lay on the floor and fall asleep, but I would, like, he just wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to be there for me. Sometimes I needed help, like whatever it was, there was no complaining. There was no pushback. It was nothing. He wanted to do it. So then, or the deal was eventually when I got comfortable enough, I would kind of feed the baby, wake him up so I could quickly get back in bed. He would change their diaper, re-swaddle them, and put them back down. Like, it was always teamwork. So it just goes to show, like, it fits so much with his personality. But yeah, he was always there and hands-on.
What a blessing. I'm sure new mothers would listen to this and go, man,
right?
If only. Because I'm sure there are some men that are not as hands-on or dedicated to helping, one, their children, but also their wives. And I think that's probably something that you look back on fondly.
When I tell people that, they're like, what? And you went to work the next day? They're like, yeah, no, that wasn't our deal. Our deal was I would sleep because I had to go to work the next day. And like, it makes sense, but
right.
That's what worked for us, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, listening to that, I'm like, I wish I could just let things roll off my back and realize that life has a plan and I'm going to make the most of it. And it sounds like that was kind of Matt's approach, is that, look at all these blessings around me. Why not celebrate those? And, bad things are going to happen and during the day at work, and leave it there.
Without a doubt. He also, I didn't add, would come home from work and typically make dinner as well. So he would make dinner, bathe the girls. Like, he literally did it all. But that's because people are like, what is wrong with you? Because he was very, like, he had this way of, like, how he wanted to eat. He needed, like, he loved grilling, and he wanted, like, a grilled meat with vegetables and, like, a starch, right? Like, that was his thing. So he took charge of that. He wanted to grill food. I'm like, all right, listen, I'll make a lasagna. I'll do, like, some kind of, like, dish. He wasn't into that. I'm like, all right, well, then it's on you. And he enjoyed it. He loved cooking. He loved, he loved that kind of stuff. He literally loved everything about life.
Right. Man, if only I could feel that way every day. I feel it once in a while, but I can't imagine what that must be like to be someone that just appreciates the good in everything. Do you find that your girls do that?
London is the happiest. You could tell her that you just got a new piece of paper, and she's like, you got a new piece of paper? What does it look like? Can I see it? What does it do? Like, literally anything excites her. The thought of any and everything. It is the most beautiful quality.
That's amazing.
I have ever seen. It's pretty cool. And I have a feeling that that's probably how Matt started to be that way. So I really hope that she is able to kind of maintain that throughout her life. And that I always worry that somebody or something is going to break her spirit.
Yeah.
And, especially after what happened to us, I was so concerned that she was not going to be that person that she was destined to be.
Right.
And I still wonder that sometimes.
Yeah.
But she does. She has this beautiful quality about her. And not that Arden doesn't, but London's zest for life is just, like, over the top.
Yeah, she's got a lot of Matt in her. So you just mentioned what happened to you, or mentioned that something happened. So I think it's important. I think this is, I mean, you mentioned a few shifts of when you met Matt and things that changed in your life, but this one was major, and it completely changed your lives. So share a little bit about that, of what you're comfortable with.
On March 8th, 2019, Matt had a work trip planned to fly to Tampa with some other colleagues and have lunch with a client. And they were going to fly home. And he wanted me to have his gym bag packed because he wanted me to take it to the gym. He was going to meet me there and we were going to work out together that afternoon. So he had, his whole day set up. He left that morning, like he always did, and drove to a small airport locally. They got on the plane, they flew to Tampa, had lunch with their client. He texted me when he was on his way back. At the time, we were building a pool in our backyard, and he wanted updates. He wanted to know what was going on with the pool. He wanted all the pictures and all the things. And shortly after, he texted me and said something happened on the plane. Candidly, my response was, what the blank are you talking about? And he repeated it, and we kind of went back and forth for a little bit. I called him. He didn't answer, and I was kind of, pleading with him to answer the phone.
Right.
He said he couldn't answer. They were trying to land. And shortly after that, he texted and said, I love you and I love the girls. I knew that they could have landed the plane based on what he had said. So I wasn't freaking out just yet.
Right.
Oddly enough, Matt loved to tell people where he was going and what he was doing, because just like London, everything was so exciting.
Right.
So for some reason, though, that day, his family didn't know, his parents, I should say, didn't know that he was traveling, and they had plans to come over that afternoon. So I called his mom and I just said, hey, Matt said this, and Matt's dad used to fly small planes. So he's like, okay, no big deal. They can, they're going to be fine. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm just letting you guys know, kind of thing.
Right.
I made another call to Matt's brother, who also flies planes. And when he answered, he let me know that he answered the phone, and I could tell that he already knew. He had already heard from Matt and that something, was happening. So he's like, hey, I'm going to fly out there real quick. I'm going to go pick them up. I'll fly them home. It's like, okay. And when I hung up that second phone call and I looked at my phone, Matt hadn't responded. And I texted him again. And, for those of you that have an iPhone, you know that an iMessage is blue and a text message is green. So
Right.
When I texted him again, it was green. And I instantly knew something was wrong. So in that moment, I'm home. My daughters are here.
Right.
And in that moment, I'm trying to keep myself calm, but I also knew deep down something wasn't right. So I kept texting, I kept calling, and I knew if something happened and he was okay, he would call me the moment he could. So after some time had gone by and I was making phone calls, I called his parents back, I called my mom, I called his brother again, and I hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't answering the phone, and my messages kept going through as a text message. I knew.
You probably knew too, because of that connection that you had with him. All the signs were pointing.
I think so. Like I said, that first time when I hung up that second phone call and looked at my phone and he hadn't responded, that's when it hit me. Like I knew.
Right.
I was just hoping for a different response and hoping that, like, okay, something really bad happened, but he has to get himself to a place where he can call me. So, like, give it a couple minutes, give it an hour, he's going to call me. So as my mom showed up at the house, his parents showed up at the house, we're in our office in our house and we're trying to distract the girls. They're watching a movie in the living room. We have the TV on in the office. Matt's dad's on his computer in the office, and we're just waiting for something. And I'm calling, people and just trying to make sense of it through like literally like waves of nausea and freakouts. And I mean,
Panic.
yeah, like where does my life go from here? Like knowing deep down. So shortly after that, we knew we were getting mixed reports. We heard that somebody thought they landed, they were going to be okay, or they were okay. Then we made contact with somebody who said that their plane had crashed in Lake Okeechobee. So I overheard Matt's mom on the phone. She repeated what that person told her. And like everything went blank after that. Like I just remember thinking like, what? Like, where do you take your life from here?
It's like a wall suddenly is there. And what do I do now?
It's almost as if you have, and this is not about me. Like in that moment, I just kept thinking about him. And like, if that were true, what they told us, what was he thinking? What was he feeling? Knowing that he wasn't going to be able to come home and see his kids.
Right.
Or.
So all your thoughts were with Matt and not necessarily you or his family that was there, your kids. It was Matt because of the person that you've described for the last bit of just this loving life individual. And I mean, it makes sense having gone through an accident of a family member, you think, what are those last moments like? Because, as you tell your story, I imagine the same thing because of, him waking up with you in the middle of the night to do these things with the girls, to start these traditions. I'm sure a lot of that really went through his mind and probably, I mean, I don't want to make light of anything, but because he loved life, I'm sure there's a lot of pieces that he was thinking about all the good things. We think about when tragedy happens, we talk about, or people talk about kind of your life flashing before your eyes. Imagine watching Matt's movie and all the things that he loved. I feel, in a way, I think that would be amazing for a lot of people to be able to reflect on such great memories, but not to make light of that.
I actually have thought that many times. Like, if it's true that he got to live his life and fast forward, like,
right.
I don't think there's one thing that he could say he regrets doing. Like,
right.
He lived his life to the full. I hate to sound cliche, but like to the fullest. I've never in my life met somebody who could find the positive in any and everything, who loved every thing, he loved people, he loved being around, there isn't one thing that he would ever complain about or, dread or anything. And
you made a perfect example of that and showing how he loved everything when you talked about his pre-Rachel relationship, and that he stuck around for whatever that situation was and probably hung on to the good pieces or gave benefit of the doubt and those kind of pieces. And I think that in itself, that tiny little blip that you mentioned, shows why your daughter is the way she is, but also how much, that he found the good in anything. Like, oh no, there's a hole in my yard. look, we could do wonderful things with this kind of thing. And I imagine that's how he was. It's like, oh, as a whole, we can make this a cool bunker for us.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday was March 8th. And typically on his birthday, which is September 18th, and around, March 8th, we get our family and friends, or, ask his family and friends to join us at the beach. It's a place Matt loved. He loved being at the beach. And we all kind of sit around, hang out, share stories about Matt, and then we put flowers in the water for him. This year, one of his friends told a great story. So Matt also loved to play golf, and his friends would always make fun of him and say he was a terrible golfer. And it doesn't matter, he would still do it.
I can relate.
And the story he told was, it didn't matter how far away from the hole Matt was, or off the green, or, it could have landed in somebody's driveway. And Matt would be like, wow, did you see that shot? Did you see the power behind that shot? Did you see how far I hit that? Like, he would never say anything bad. Like, he could find the positive in literally everything. And if that's not the most beautiful quality, I don't know what is. Like, I don't know anyone else who can do that.
Do you think that since the accident, do you feel that, I know it's only been a few years, do you feel like you are absorbing some of the qualities that Matt had?
It's funny you ask that, because I do think that often. I have found I am much more accepting of who people are, knowing that this is who they are and you accept it or you don't, without the notion of, or the idea of, trying to alter pieces of that person. I feel like I give people the benefit of the doubt very often now. I think I was quick to make judgments before, not necessarily on people, but just in situations. And now I'm like, well, let me just, hold on to that and make sure, or think, before I make a decision. Or I feel like I try to be positive in, any situation, knowing that things could be so much worse.
Right.
You don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know what somebody's been through. Everybody has a story. And I have kind of made it my goal to help continue to spread positivity in Matt's name. So on his birthday and around the date of his accident, I made cards that say "Live like Matt Fio" with the hashtag "Live like Matt Fio," and I'll give them out and do an act of kindness for a random person. And I ask that other people, join in on that twice a year, so that there are positive things still happening in Matt's name. There was a time we went to Tampa and we were eating breakfast at a restaurant, and I just happened to overhear a waitress complaining because somebody left the restaurant and didn't leave her a tip. And so I was like, Matt, do you have some money? Like, can we just give that lady some money? And without like blinking an eye, he reached in his wallet, pulled out some money, and gave this waitress. He's like, hey, we heard what happened. Here's. So, and the look on her face, like, but that's just who Matt was. That's what he would have done.
Right.
Always. He was always trying to just make other people happy. Like at Starbucks all the time, he'd pay for the person behind us for no reason. So I try to do little things like that for sure, to try to, maintain that positivity, that kindness, that just good, lighthearted, spirit in the world. Like I said, I do find that I'm more accepting of people than I previously would have been. This is funny to me. Matt loved spicy food. He loved coffee. And there's one other thing. It hit me the other day, but it'll come back to me in a second. So I never drank coffee. Now I drink coffee every day. And I don't know why I started drinking coffee, but he would be like, what are you doing? If he saw me right now, he'd be like, you're drinking coffee all of a sudden? I also used to hate spicy food. I actually genuinely enjoy it now. Not super spicy, but I like a little kick in my food now. He would be like, you, the person that doesn't even use like salt and pepper, you're eating spicy food. Like, what are you doing? So I feel like those little things he's kind of left with me, and maybe, just maybe my body has changed because it, wants to feel closer to him. I don't know. But I find those two things very interesting.
I mean, from someone watching from afar, because we don't live near each other, we don't really talk very often, but I've watched this journey that you've gone on. I've seen the before, and I've seen the moment, and I've seen the after. And I see you changing in positive ways. I see you doing these things to honor Matt. And by doing that, you're keeping the spirit of Matt alive, and your kids are showing it. I love watching every year when you have this Live Like Matt Fio project, if you will, because what it does, and I'm sure there's some heartwarming moments in it for you, but it's not necessarily the acts of kindness that people are doing that I find heartwarming. It's the stories that they're sharing, and that they're spreading who Matt was to people that would never know. Right. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I think in the long run, that's really going to help your girls keep that alive.
I hope so. And to be quite honest, the reason I started it was pure selfishness. I thought to myself, what can I do to make myself happier on this day? What can I do on his birthday? And what can I do on the date of the accident to make myself happy? And I found that doing things for other people made me happy. And then watching the trickle effect that it had on strangers. I mean, I had someone doing it in India, across the country. People ask me to mail them cards, and they don't even know who Matt is. So watching that trickle effect has been pure, like, selfish satisfaction, for me, because it makes me so happy. And that's honestly the reason I started it, was for myself. And and now, like, I just want to do it to make other people smile. But in reality, like yesterday, is a perfect example. I noticed every time I checked in with myself yesterday, I had a smile on my face. And, that just said a lot. It was because I was walking around with a stack of $5 Starbucks gift cards that I attached to the little Live Like Matt Fio cards. And I was just handing them out to random people that I would pass yesterday. And that just, like, made me giddy. It made me feel good, and it made me think of Matt. And, it just kind of helped give me something to shift my attention on and focus on such an awful day.
Right. And I bet it was different than it was last year. And I bet it was different than it was the first anniversary. And I think that's important for people listening, is that everyone's grief journey is different, and we all find ways to process and to move forward. And just because yesterday, on the anniversary of the accident, you checked in with yourself and found a smile, that means that you're processing it, right? But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You're allowed to be happy and move through things and feel certain ways, whatever that may be. Having lived through an accident myself, not me, but losing a family member, I remember those early anniversaries and how easy it is to only think about the accident, right? Or to only focus on that sadness. And I commend you, even though you say it started with selfish reasons, you found a way to make that day as positive as it could be for such a tragic moment in your life. And I think it's beautiful. And I think what you do is amazing. And I think people should just continue to do it all year round, right? But it is one day that we focus on right now, and maybe it'll grow from there. And I'm sure it will, because if someone gets that pay it forward kind of feeling, or just like that act of kindness, it sticks around, and it might influence them to do something. They're out to dinner and they hear a waitress or a waiter or anyone there say someone stiffed them at a table. They might say, remember when someone did something for me? I'm gonna pay it forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to harp on it too much, but I'd like to know a little bit about how your girls are doing as they progress through growing up, because they were fairly young when Matt passed. So how are they now?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you asking me that. They are great. They, are doing really well. I find that I think, of course, it hits me a bit harder because, as I said previously, when we were talking specifically about London, I worry that they have now become a completely different person than the person they would have been otherwise. I can't imagine being in their shoes, especially for Arden, my youngest, who at the time was only 2. She was, a little, it was a little less than 2 months away from her 3rd birthday, that she doesn't have her own core memories really of him. She'll say things that surprise me every now and then. We'll drive past somewhere and she'll be like, Daddy took me there. I'm like, what? Like, how do you know that? How do you and it makes me so happy. Is that something that's going to stay with her? I don't know. But I make it a point to constantly, anytime there's something that Matt would have done or Matt did that they're doing or that I'm doing or somebody's doing, I'll be like, Daddy loved that or Daddy did that. Matt went to Clemson and their colors are purple and orange. So when you ask Arden what her favorite colors are, she says purple and orange. They're always trying to incorporate, when she draws a picture at school, always she colors purple and orange. I'm trying to, I see that she's trying to incorporate pieces of Matt where she can. London will be a bit, I should say, London was a bit more vocal about it previously than she currently is.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that, we've had conversations about that, and she acknowledges that look how far she's come. She'll tell me things like that, like, no, Mom, before I felt that way, now I feel this way, which is pretty impressive for her to be able to process that and be able to see her own shift. For Arden, I really try to have those conversations because she will speak candidly with me about it. She'll ask me lots of questions. I'll also say that there are always incredibly sad moments in that, comments they make, questions they ask that literally it's like a dagger to my heart. Arden once said, like, well, how tall was Daddy? I don't know how tall he was. Like, things like that, or the sound of his voice. Like, London has made a comment, she doesn't remember what he sounds like. I'm like, yes, you do. And I'll play a video. So,
right.
Trying to just remind them that, we have all these things and memories and that he lives on inside of them. I'm really big on, talking about that. Arden at the beach this past weekend, when we got together with our friends and family, she wanted to make a couple announcements. And one of them was that every time she sees a butterfly, she thinks that it's Daddy flying by. So just little things like that.
I keep going back to, I was young when my mom passed, and I think you're doing all the things that I wish people would have done for me. And I don't say that as like I'm mad about it, but I think back in the time, people were afraid to share things or to be open about it or to talk about her or any of these pieces. And looking back, I wish they had. I can't change anything like that, but I think it's important for you to know that someone that's gone through something not similar, but a similar experience after the fact, I think you're doing all the right things. I think you're doing the things that Matt would want you to do. And I hope that you don't spend too much time worrying about who your daughters are going to be, because I think you're guiding them on this path to who they are. And unfortunately, this is a part of their life, but hopefully they will be better because of it. And I say that as someone that feels like a better human because of the experiences that I've gone through, both bad and good. So I hope you find some comfort in that what you're doing for these girls is amazing, and what someone like me as an 8-year-old would have loved for my family to do for me.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I do. I'm not going to lie. I think about it probably every day.
Yeah. And then honestly, too, it was 3 years ago, right? And so every year is going to be a little different for you. And however that is, know that it's okay. Wherever you are in your journey, it's totally okay. So I want to end with a question for you. And that question is, how is Rachel right now?
Rachel is. Do I refer to myself in third person? I don't know.
No, you can do however you want.
I am hopeful for the future. I am so lucky to have been with Matt, been married to Matt, been in Matt's life, had to have had Matt in my life. I say it often. If that is what my story looked like, to be able to have a love like Matt and I did, I'm okay with it. I miss so much about him. And when you think about those things, it's hard to think about how much more time you have left without that person. Especially when I think about my daughters. I know you asked about me specifically, but the small little changes that have happened in 3 years with them, they have their entire lives ahead of them. And I think about that often, how much they are going to do, how much they are going to change, and that he doesn't get to be a part of that, and that they don't get to have him as a part of that. And that, of course, affects me in turn. However, I do try to focus on, as we said, all the positive things, all the good things. Life is so beautiful. Love is so beautiful. And if we allow ourselves to shut down and remain in this, at this like plateau, it doesn't do anyone good. It surely won't do myself any good. So I still find that I sometimes am taking it one day at a time. I think I'm doing well. And then when I look back on something that seems very recent, I'm like, oh, wow, I think I was still in a fog then. Like, it's very interesting how you perceive yourself in the moment and how you can perceive yourself when you look back on it. But to answer your question, I am doing as okay as I think I can be doing in this moment.
And that is 100% okay. And like we said before, if you have an amazing day in which everything was great and happy and you were laughing, and that's okay. And you have a sad day, and that's okay as well. And I think I was talking to my friend Marty on one of these conversations, and I feel like there's a socially expected grief process, and we need to get rid of that, because we are human and we have emotions, and we've all gone through something different. But I think what's wonderful about these conversations is that there's such a common through line of people going through big changes in their lives that completely shift things. And I think people will listen to this story and learn from you and learn from Matt how to be better humans and how to move forward when something so tragic happens. And I'm sorry that you are in this place, but I am also happy to know you and to see you grow through this place, despite the really, really tough times. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your story with me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm happy to be on here and share my story. It's something that I actually, as odd as this is to say, I enjoy talking about because I love talking about Matt and it's therapeutic for me too. So I appreciate it so much.
And I think it's important to know that we're not alone. You're not the only person to ever face a tragedy like this. And to be able to find or even just hear stories like you're sharing, someone else could be going through something very similar and go, I'm in an okay place. I'm where I should be, and things are okay, and I'm not alone. So I thank you for that. And thank you for joining me on the Life Shift podcast. I hope I see you sometime soon.
I know. If you're ever in South Florida, you let me know.
Yeah, I will do. Thanks again, my friend. You've just listened to the Life Shift podcast. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.